Hello, everyone, and welcome to this podcast introduction to the first of our new programs, Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. When I decided to change the direction of the program somewhat, Jefferson will still be here, our usual guests will still be coming. The Jeffersonian will always be a central theme of everything that I do because from the time I was 25 years old until today, I've been a Jeffersonian. I want to live in Mr. Jefferson's America with, of course, some key adjustments on slavery and women and Native Americans and so on. But I believe in Jefferson's vision of a self-governing people, a people who educate themselves, a people who are up to the challenge of sorting out their public business together with civility, majority rule, science, and good sense. My host for the initial program was my old friend Barbara Hamm of WHRV in Norfolk. She hosts a Thursday noon program called Another View, which is very popular. And she agreed to be the guest host on the first of these broadcasts and podcasts, and I couldn't have been more gratified by that. We were in the studio. There was a live audience of, I suppose, 60 or 70 people. I've had a long and interesting history in Norfolk. My old friend Paul Lassico of the TCC Roper Theater has been one of the people that worked hardest to make all my dreams come true. When I wanted to do a play, Mr. Jefferson and Maria Cosway, My Head and My Heart, he agreed to produce it. In fact, that was the first thing, I believe, that we ever did together. I performed a range of characters on the stage of the Roper Theater. Theodore Roosevelt, J. Robert Oppenheimer, of course, Thomas Jefferson. I've debated Hamilton. When I wanted to do Shakespeare, sort of a one-man Shakespeare recitation program, he agreed not only to be in it and to direct it, but to appear with me after the intermission in maybe the greatest scene in Hamlet, Act 5, Scene 1, the graveyard, which ends with Hamlet saying, "Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest and most excellent fancy." Paul played the gravedigger, the clown there, and we've had a wonderful time with it. In fact, we've gone to several different venues around the country and are seeking more. I love to perform the Shakespeare program. My first love was Renaissance literature back when I was a young man. In fact, I expected when I was 23 to be an English professor at some liberal arts college with, tweed jacket and maybe a pipe, although I have never smoked. That's how I saw myself, writing learned manuscripts about John Donne and later Shakespeare and Milton and St. Augustine and the Reformation and the rise of humanism. And I've continued to do some of that through the course of my life, but at a certain point, my old friend Ev Albers of the North Dakota Humanities Council sort of tripped me out of that traditional approach and asked me to perform under an open-air tent as Thomas Jefferson. I did so with great reluctance, and now I've been married to Thomas Jefferson for more than 30 years. I spend more time thinking about Jefferson than about any other subject. I've written more about Jefferson than any other subject with the possible exception of Lewis and Clark. I've performed in all 50 states, in the Mariana Islands, in Hawaii, in Europe, on cruise ships, in the Panama Canal, in Alaska. It's been quite a run. I was making a list earlier today of all the characters that I have performed, some of them for one or two performances only because they were relatively obscure. Say Jean-Jacques Rousseau for the Great Basin Chautauqua when we talked about the millennium, or Jean Calvin for a Presbyterian conference in Iowa. That was a predestinarian disaster. I've performed as Steinbeck many times around the country, and John Wesley Powell, J. Robert Oppenheimer, my favorite character, who's having a little bit of a resurgence now that the blockbuster film is coming out in the summer of 2023. And most of what I've done, I've been able to perform at the Roper Theater, thanks to Paul Lassico. And this time we did something called, what we called it is Jefferson Canceled, but it really was the trial of Thomas Jefferson, and Paul was unable to perform as the interlocutor because he has sort of under the pressure of trying to get so many things done with a short staff at the Roper. So he found this extraordinary actor and comedian, Jason Kipros, to be the interlocutor, and he was fantastic. And we had Jefferson in the docket, I was about to say on the ropes, for an hour and a half, as Jason really challenged Jefferson's views of political infighting, his dispossession of Native Americans and his American Indian policy, his attitude towards women in public life, and of course, the issue of issues, Jefferson on race and slavery. And it did not, of course, put Jefferson in a very favorable light. In the end, he asked me to defend myself as Jefferson, and my only defense was, look what else I did. The Declaration of Independence, the Virginia Statute for Religious Liberty, the Library of Congress, etc., etc. Jefferson, America's first great architect, America's first great wine connoisseur. Jefferson, one of the fathers of the library classification systems of our time. Jefferson, the paleontologist. Jefferson, the man who collected Native American vocabularies and was intending to publish a list of them, a comparative list of them during his retirement. But unfortunately, the papers were lost in a sad accident at the docks of Richmond. But that's hardly a defense, is it? It's really just saying there's so much more to Jefferson than just the fundamentally difficult issue of race and slavery. And then we took a break. When I came back, I was out of character, and I proposed a new way of thinking about all this. I've been obsessed with how to maneuver our way through this righteous moment of cancel culture. Will Jefferson be canceled? If not, how do we need to think and talk about him in the future so that we can do justice to his greatness and his genius? And, he's America's Da Vinci. And yet, hold him accountable for those parts of his career, his writings, his life, that are not just cringeworthy now, but appalling for us to think about. And although I don't like presentism, which is what judging the past by our standards, even in his own lifetime, Jefferson knew that slavery was an abomination and a fundamental hypocrisy. And his closest friends were abolitionists. There's no way that we can say that he was a man of his times because, first of all, he always wanted to be ahead of his times, and usually was. And secondly, the closest friends he had in the world were all principled antagonists of the future of slavery. And so Jefferson reflected a sort of complacent attitude of the planter class of his times. But it was by no means representative of all Virginians, all Americans, or all of the members of the Enlightenment scattered around the world. So I tried to make sense of this. I called it the Asterisk Project. I'm going to change that to something else because it could be seen as a sort of footnoting system, as marginalizing rather than what I intend for it, which is to make sure that we never talk about Jefferson again, about any part of his great achievement again, without factoring in race and slavery. So it was a stunning week. I did 4 different things before 4 different audiences. I can't thank the people at WHRV enough. Barbara Hamley, of course, Bert Schmidt, my old friend, Tom, Heather, Katie, etc. I came back a little tired, of course, a little bruised by some of the criticism of Mr. Jefferson and the Jefferson performer, but it was glorious. And now here we go, listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. We're underway. There will be voices from the road. There will be some of the voices you've always been hearing. Jefferson will, of course, make appearances. There will be book reviews. There will be essays. There will be ambient sound from my travels. I couldn't be more excited. From the time I was 17 years old, I have wanted to do this, to wander the country in an RV of some sort, or a trailer, or truck camper, you name it, and to see the country for myself, to go to all the national parks and all the national forests and all the national wildlife refuges and all the national monuments and all the battlefields, and to the homes of presidents and to the homes of Elvis and John Steinbeck and Mark Twain and Emily Dickinson and Zora Neale Hurston, etc. But most of all, just to go out, slow down, park in the open air, meet people, some that I seek to meet and some who are perfect strangers, and listen to try to get the beat of America on the eve of our 250th birthday. So I know some people are going to miss the Jefferson Hour, but believe me, not much will really change. Some people are cautiously interested in all this and want to know how it will really be accomplished. There will be a few growing pains, I'm sure, so I just ask you to stay with us, to keep listening, and if you like it, to tell your friends. But go to ltamerica.org, sign up for my weekly newsletter, contribute to the success of this program in any way you can. We need, of course, a budget. But most of all, provide comments and suggestions. Tell me people we should meet around the country, places we should go, themes that we should pursue, interviews we should conduct, books and articles to read, magical places that are not on anyone's map. What is this country as we approach 250? Are we a single nation anymore? Unclear. I'll have lots more to say about this. From every zip code, I hope, in this country, certainly the great bulk of them. And I really mean it, that I'm going out to learn, not to speak. You can't learn when you're talking. And I've had a lifetime to fill my mind with whatever's in it and all the perspectives that I have developed. But I'm just one person, and indeed a male, a white male, a senior citizen white male, and a very privileged American. I got to study at Oxford. I got to study at the University of Minnesota. I've had a chance to travel the world. I've had extraordinary experiences, addressed 24 or 25 state legislatures, all the judicial conferences in the country. I've met presidents, a couple of them, and performed for the White House on Jefferson's 250th birthday. And thanks to the Chautauqua work I've done, I've been in a number of Ken Burns films, another one just about to be released, The Buffalo. I couldn't ask for much more than I have received in the course of my lifetime. I write for governing.org, and now, of course, I'll be writing SCADS, I think that's a technical term, for Listening to America. That's ltamerica.org. So let's go to the first program with great thanks to Barbara Hamm and Bert Schmidt at WHRV. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of my new program, Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. I had the great good fortune of recording the first of our new series in the studios of WHRV in Norfolk, Virginia, with a live studio audience. The guest host was my old friend Barbara Hamm, who has a very popular weekly program on Thursdays called Another View. We talked about my plans for Listening to America, how much continuity it will have with the Thomas Jefferson Hour, whether Mr. Jefferson will continue to make appearances on Listening to America, and what am I trying to discover as I travel the country on the eve of the 250th birthday of the United States. I had said that I was searching like Steinbeck for the soul of the country, and she rightly challenged that and said there is no one soul of the country, and how can one person, however good his heart and his intentions, can presume to get at the soul of this extraordinary country with so many regional dialects, so many different ethnic groups, so much multiplicity of races and vocations and identities. Maybe there are only souls of America, and maybe there isn't a single America in which to seek the soul. We talked about one of my heroes, John Steinbeck, and whether his 1960 Travels with Charlie journey around the country could serve as a template for a country almost infinitely different from the one that he saw on the eve of the Kennedy administration. We talked about some of the projects I'm undertaking with Edward S. Curtis, Water in the West, Theodore Roosevelt's conservation footprint, and much more. So let's go to the interview with Barbara Hamm in the studios of WHRV in Norfolk, Virginia.
So hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Hamm, executive producer and host of the radio show Another View. It's heard on WHRV FM, NPR for Eastern Virginia, and streamed live at anotherviewradio.org. And I am so honored to serve as a guest host on the inaugural edition of Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. So what is Listening to America, and what about the Jefferson Hour? Here to tell us all about it, please welcome humanities scholar, author, and educator, Mr. Clay Jenkinson. Hey. So
Hello.
you gotta put people's mind at ease. What's going to happen to the Jefferson Hour?
So there will be more continuity than change. We'll still have Joe Ellis on from time to time, and Lindsay Chervinsky will be coming on, and David Nicandri, our Enlightenment correspondent from the West Coast, and Mr. Jefferson will make appearances. So it'll be more of the same, really. But here's why I'm changing it. I've been at it for a long time. You can never grow tired of Thomas Jefferson. You can never really finally understand Thomas Jefferson. But I know that I want to look at some things that are sort of outside of Jefferson's purview. And so I thought this would be a good time to sort of morph the program, make a wider embrace. And one of the things is that I have all of my life, since I was 17, wanted to hit the road, sort of like Jack Kerouac or Charles Kuralt or William Lease Teat Moon or John Steinbeck, and go what Steinbeck called it, this monster country. I thought, wouldn't it be something if I could just go out, now that the technology is
so
possible.
You're going to be in a big old bus and with all the amenities and, like glam camping?
You had to bring it up, Barbara. I'll be in a pup tent, but what I want is an Airstream, and I know someone who's listening has one and needs to, it's time. You don't use it, it's time to, re-gift it. But I'm going to hit the road like John Steinbeck, and I'm going to do programs from the road. We just got back from a 2-week period in southern Utah to talk about water in the West. We interviewed 8 or 9 people. We were on several reservations. We were in a number of national parks and national monuments. We saw Marble Canyon and Lake Powell, and we really wanted to go down and figure out what's going on with water in the West. That doesn't sound quite like Thomas Jefferson, but it does sound like listening to America. So that's the idea.
No, that's the idea going now. I gotta ask you, do you have a Charlie?
I can't keep a chia pet alive. I travel a lot, You've got, a dog is a discipline. And I'm on the road too much. I would love to take a dog, but I wouldn't take an aging French poodle. My mother was a great lover of miniature schnauzers, but that doesn't really seem romantic enough, a yippy little lap dog.
You need a big dog.
Yeah, you gotta have a big dog. So, no, I don't think I'll do that. I might get a giant stuffed dog and put it in the passenger seat, because it's about the same if you think about it.
So Steinbeck talked about the soul of a nation, the soul of America. You're in search of the soul of our America today. So my question to you is, whose soul are you looking for?
I knew you would ask that question. And it's a scary question to me because, of course, we all have our zones of familiarity. So if you just said, go do good stuff for the next 10 years, I would know how to do that. But if you're going to look for the soul of America, first of all, you have to realize there are many Americas. Virginia is not North Dakota. North Dakota is not Utah. Utah is not Alaska. So you should get out of your mind that there's one paradigm. And as you know, after 250 years, we're approaching the 250th birthday of the country. Race continues to be the unspoken center of American history, that we've all been made aware of this more than probably ever before in the last few years. And I think in a good way. And so we can't talk about the soul of America if we just talk about the soul of Anglo-Saxon America. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to need your help. People say, well, you should talk to this person about this subject. What we found already in going to the Southwest to talk about water is that one person will say, oh, you need to talk to George over there. And that leads to somebody else and another perspective and another voice. I don't presume that I can just wander into African American communities with a microphone and say, tell me what the soul of America is. I think that's probably not a really very
it's
polite
interesting.
thing.
I served as moderator for a discussion in Colonial Williamsburg with all of these museums and places around the country in preparation for the 250. And the topic of the conversation was, how do we make it inclusive? And so I know that in some of the materials that we've been talking about and all, your fear is that it becomes a jumble of everybody doing their own thing as opposed to us looking at America as all of ours?
It's a really tough question. So if you just think of for a moment of spend an evening watching an hour of Fox and then an hour of MSNBC on any cultural issue, and you come away just tearing your hair out and saying, there is no America. It's just brickbats and it's chaos. So imagine what the 250th birthday of the country is going to be like. On the one hand, you're going to have sort of the 1619 perspective that it's been a racist country from the beginning and that there's an awful lot to answer for. And on the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have the hard right conservatives saying, we're the greatest thing that ever happened to the world and we have nothing to apologize for, and how dare you apologize for this country. I'm afraid it's going to be nonsense and chaos, and I want to find a better way to look at it than that.
And do you think the people in the middle have a better sense? I know, because the coasts are divisive. I get that. I live on the coast, you live on the other coast. But the folks in the middle, do they really have more of a sense of what America is or what its ideal should be?
Well, this is complicated again. I think most Americans, even now, are idealists. Mm-hmm. We have an idea of what America means, what America signifies, what America is in the world. I think all of us feel this. I think we're a little shop-worn and disillusioned at the moment, roughed up by all that's going on. But I think that idealism continues. And what we found, like in this 2-week trip through Utah and parts of Arizona and New Mexico, we talked to dozens of people. No one ever said the word Biden. No one ever said the word Trump. No one ever said the crisis at the border. In other words, people are going about their lives, and all that stuff we hear about every night is just a kind of a surface madness, I would call it. Mm-hmm. Not that it's not important, but that's not where America is at. People are doing creative things in their garages and in their basements. There are communities that are very healthy. There are people that are enlightened in ways that they don't beat their breasts about, but they just are trying to be good citizens. I'm not Charles Carlton. This isn't meant to be Pollyanna's America either. We get it that this is a deeply divided, troubled country. And I think that if we don't, in a very purposeful way, examine our nation at 250 years old and say, who are we now? What are we now? Where are we headed? What are the unresolved issues that have been with us for a long